A loser who never grew up in his 5 years, and despite the fact that he is already a teenager, he likes to play pretend and act as if there is a demon living in his right hand who was probably cursed by some ancient god from anime. Unfortunately, he is a narcissist who thinks that he is cool, but in reality he is not and does nothing except call himself a noob and a loser. But before you start feeling sorry for him, let me dispel your illusions and show that he lives much better than you. Despite the fact that he acts like a noob all day long, he somehow managed to attract 4 girls to the literary club, and he is the only guy in it that's lucky. So lucky his classmate is included in his grief, and his childhood friend that Moyo, the niece of the head of the club Chifuyu, and his older sister and the president of the club Su. It's just a miracle that he ended up in a club room where there are only girls, but let's leave it as one of the wonders of the world. One day, they are sitting at the table and discussing his inability to get rid of the habit smoking weed. But during one of his performances, his hands quickly begin to glow like a bull's, and on that date, their lives change once and for all. So all the other members of the club also received some kind of superpower, and after 6 months, it became the norm for them to demonstrate their superpowers every day, mocking Jira when he tries to act like some kind of weirdo. One day after school, a classmate and childhood friend of Jira, this is mine, walked into the club and saw that he was sitting on the floor holding his hand like some kind of crazy person. He acted as if there was some kind of secret power in him, but Tomoyo just walked past him, sat down on a chair, and reminded him that the only power that he has is his gases, which have been haunting him since he ate those tie-in for lunch. Embarrassed, Dri stood up and asked her to at least play along with him, but she said that not only she finds him annoying, but he told her that the others usually play along with him, and she argued with him to check. After that, he began to wait. When he entered the room, his second wife came in, that is, another member of the Hotoka club. Later they sat down at the table and discussed his inability to grow out of this age, and Dry began to defend himself by saying that they have no reason to think that one day they will not receive supernatural abilities because the very birth of the universe and this planet is a miracle. With these words, he stretches his hand forward and pretends that he is superpower again, but to everyone's surprise, his hand begins to glow, and from that day the lives of all members of the club change once and for all. 6 months later, for them it became the norm is to come to the club once a month and test their superpowers. Dry organizes monthly tests of superpowers, and they teleport half the class to the deserted mountains where Goku and Vegeta fought and demonstrate their powers. Shufu and Toka Dry are the first to fight. Explains that Shufu's power is the ability to create the world. That is, she is a goddess who can create anything from matter to dimensional portals and even life. On the other side of Hotoka has an ability called Over the Element. What makes her the last an avatar? It controls all the 5 elements, including fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning. Moreover, she can combine any number of elements to create hybrid elements. Their sparring begins with the chief creating and launching several fiery copies at Hoto, and she blocks them with a tornado from the wind. Then she goes on the offensive, creating magma from the earth, but Shifu blocks it by creating a stone slab on top, and it begins to resemble a dragon ball fight. The situation heats up, and Tamayo uses her ability to stop time to stop the fight, and then returns them to the chairs and ends the match. Her ability allows her to slow down and speed up time, but does not allow her to travel to the past. Then Soulmate uses her Path of Origin ability to return the fighters to their original state. After this, Dry decides to demonstrate his power, but suddenly the student council president Maria comes in and says that she came to check because she received a lot of noise complaints. Dry remembers how he pretended to watch TV and decides to deal with it again by pretending. He comes up and starts acting like a cool detective from an anime, saying Maria that he knows who she really is and that she didn't come to check but to keep an eye on them. He continues to try to get out, but Tomoyo finally shuts him up by hitting him in the face. Asia apologizes for his brainless surprise. Maria begins to ask how he knows who she really and that she has been watching them since you awakened. Her superpowers. His pretense worked this time, and we all begin to think if he is the lost brother of the Shadow from the Shadow Empiric. They ask her about her abilities and what she knows about them, and Moroi says that he will tell if they defeat her in battle. Tamayo asks if she can use her ability to stop time and defeat her. Dry comes up and says that he will also accept a challenge and demonstrate his abilities. After that, he announces his ability knock on the door of hell and begins to unbutton his jacket. He asks Marie she knows why he wears a jacket to school every day, and she replies that it is winter and it is part of the school uniform, but he counters by saying that in fact his jacket has magical seals that hold back his power and cause him more suffering than emotional trauma. Then he throws his jacket at Hotoka and prepares to release his ability Dark Fireball. It looks like he actually has something like Amaterasu from Naruto. But then Naroi uses her technique and reveals that she is a real ninja copier. Her ability allows her to copy any technique that she sees activated in front of her. She immediately seals the Dark One, and this sentence she comes up to her and says that they just need to not use their abilities and then for against one and let them beat her like hooligans. When she will understand her place, they will allow her to apologize and she will tell them that she awakened her powers a month ago and at first they seemed useless to her. But one day she received a message from a stranger who said that in the literature club there are people with the same abilities as her. Then she began to observe them and found out that they have superpowers. They all sat and wondered who this mysterious man is and what he is going to do with them. After a few days, Jiraiya asked everyone to come up with secret superhero names. They all showed their love to the anime. Hauka called herself Red Hotoka and her alternate names were Blue Hotoka, Green Hotoka, and so on. In the end, we all agreed that her name would be Lame Hotoka. Then Shifu came up with the name Strawberry, and then several more names that hinted at the fact that her father went to get milk and did not return, and her mother meanwhile seduced his neighbor Andrew Tay. After that, Jiraiya turned to Sue and her ideas turned out to be a parody of Shirokimi the Snow Princess. Everyone approved of her choice, but Jiraiya could not resist and called her ideas cute, and she immediately ran out of the room. Finally, Tomoe called herself an endless paradox and I would call her an anime girl, but this name suits her. Jiraiya agreed and declared her the winner and awarded her the title of master. We all looked at his ass and thought how he managed to charm for girls. But then Maria entered the room and said that they were all as nosy as an earlier. Marie returns and asks what brought the student council president to school, and she replies that she came to answer the love letter that Yuri left in her locker. She says that according takes out the letter and begins to read, and everyone including Yuri himself wonders, what does this mean? He tries to remember why this is happening and remembers that the doctor told him that he has a serious mental disorder, and then comes to his senses. Tell her that he came up with the nickname Grateful Robber for her because of the peculiarity of the Japanese language. The word robber can also be translated as lover, and she misunderstood it, thinking that this is a love letter in which Yuri confesses his feelings to her. Tomoe begins to argue and tries to dissuade Mari, but she shuts her up by calling her flat like a cutting board and causes her emotional pain like her parents. Tomoe takes this to heart and tries to stop time with her power, but Mari steals her and says that she made a big mistake. But then Gerard begs her to return her power and Marie does this as a sign of the beginning of their relationship. The next morning Marie is waiting for him outside the classroom to accompany him to the club and behaves like a sweet and caring girl. They exchange contacts and she even changes her email address to Maridra for Lova Dog Soper Hotmail. After that she takes him to the club room and says that he can have fun but not to cheat on her, otherwise she will turn him into chicken nuggets. Jiraiya in the room and sees that everyone is trying to ignore him. It turns out his rice is still on and the other girls don't like that he is such a girlfriend. They all tell him to go to the jungle of Africa. Jiraiya and says that he will sort out this misunderstanding himself. Later that day he calls Miran, admits that he wrote that letter and apologizes for hurting her. She says that he shouldn't apologize because she was the one who misunderstood everything and runs away crying, and we all start to hate him for being an idiot. Tomoe comes out and tries to cheer him up, saying that it's not his fault and it's good that they broke up before things. Until far later that night Marie sends him a letter and asks if he wants to remain her friend. The next morning Jiraiya gets a call from Satomi sensei, who teaches English for them and is the curator of their club. She asks him about some translations he did on the test, but then lets him go considering how big a fan of manga he is. At that moment his classmate and rival Gami comes in. It turns out he is just as obsessed with anime as Dry, but even more flirtatious and loves to play. He asks the teacher's Nintendo DS, which she took from him in class, and calls him her lover. After that he begins to argue about anime and actresses 15-3 for, but they all leave him after a month because of his obsession with anime. At this moment Yuma goes down the stairs and goes to the club room with Jira. It's time to engage in the club's entertainment activities, and they decide to play supernatural hardball tennis. Shifu creates a core and equipment for them, and they begin to play one-on-one with Jiraiya versus Tamayo. Hotoka servers versus the media. After several supernatural hits, Jiraiya manages to defeat Tamayo, but then he plays against Hotoka and almost burns his head with one of her fiery punches. Later they all sit together in the club room, and Dry says that after passing between life and death he came up with another cool name and takes out a notebook to write down his book is called the Bloody Bible. Because of the Sumar above him, Dre ended up writing on it Bloody Weaver is the name of the stationery store and clothing brand where he bought the book. They all tease him and laugh at his mistake, making him feel like an outcast. When they finish their club business, they decide to go to karaoke together. On the way, Jiraiya, some stupid name, and decides to write it down but notices that he doesn't have a notebook. He starts to panic and tells them to go without him, and he'll go back and look notebook. Then he runs back to school to the club room and sees the white-haired woman standing in the middle of the room and reading his notebook on the river bank. The girls go further and discuss what kind of Jiraiya, and Tamayo thinks that they need the word reckless as for nicknames. And Toka tells them how in middle school the children called her the sweaty fifth VU loser and she really didn't like it. The one day Jirai came up with the nickname Fire Phoenix for her, and everyone decided to call her just ugly and no one else didn't call her an offensive nickname. She says that she knows that Dry did not do this to save her, but this is one of his main qualities. He's reliable and kind without knowing it. Then Shigami says that when she received her abilities, she wondered if she could resurrect the dead. But Jiraiya is from this idea, and now she understands that such an ability should not be in them, and she felt better. Shifu adds that Dry told her the same thing about how you can't create life, and they all admit that Dry understands theirs abilities are the best, and he always comes up with cool names and moves for them. Meanwhile, Tamayo knows what he is thinking about and imagines how he rules them all. I give them names. On the other hand, a guy from school asks Jiraiya if he is a sinner and says that he has a great sense of humor. Hearing this, the driver perks up and loses his mind. Both sit down and discuss cool nicknames, and the guy says that he has one to such a notebook and takes out his notebook with notes. Then they go to a family restaurant and discuss a nickname for anime fans and the life philosophy of a virgin suffering from a high level of rice. At that moment, Tamayo enters the restaurant and approaches their table, and Dry asks what she is doing here. She says that she often goes to this restaurant and asks what her older brother is doing here. His real name is Hajimba from Arafure. He used to be in the same literary club when he was studying, and now he is just a slacker who ran away from home and loves living at someone else's expense. She asks him to return home, but he says that he still has unfinished business and asks her to send him money to live on, and then runs away without paying for food. But before leaving, he says that one day his blow of Lucifer will collide with his darkness and leaves. When he leaves, Tomoe sits next to Jiraiya and apologizes for the behavior of his brother. And to Jiraiya, why do they have different surnames? She replies that he is her half-step brother and they have different mothers. Although Jim lives with them since childhood, he prefers to bear his mother's surname. Then she asks if he told him about his superpowers, and Jiraiya, which he hasn't, and Tamayo smiles, realizing that the mysterious man may still be her older brother. The next morning, Gerard comes to school and sees Chifuyu standing at the gate. He asks what she is doing there and whether she will be late for school, but she replies that she decided to quit school, which shocks him. When he hears this, Gerard takes Chifuyu in his arms and carries her to school. At school, she is met by her friend Yuki, who looks at Gerard and asks who Chifuyu is, introduces him as the guy from the literature club, and they go to class. Joe notices that he forgot to ask why she decided to quit school, but then decides to go back to school and leave everything as is at school. He meets Satomi Shinsei, who tells him to be careful and asks if Shifu came to the club this morning. Later that day, they all hang out at the literature club. Bandrith says that he understands something amazing. He escalates the situation and then says that they can endlessly change costumes. I join forces and offers to try. After that, they write down their wishes on a piece of paper and throw it into the ballot box. Then they take turns pulling the piece of paper and choose a costume for themselves. In the end, she becomes a maid costume herself. Sayu puts on a tracksuit. Hitoka plays the role of the sun, which blinds the eyes of Shifu. In the end puts on a suit from Balenciaga and Tamiya. Let's forget about her so that the video it remains to monetize Satomi-sensei. But they manage to show Paradise and the blow of Thor's hammer. They all change into school uniforms and Satomi-sensei asks Shifu why she returned from school early. It turns out that she said that she had a stomach ache and instead of going to class she came to the literary club. Satomi asks if she really has a stomach ache and she answers that yes. Satomi says that everything is fine and she will talk to her sister and ask her to come home. As soon as Satomi leaves, Chifuyu jumps into the portal and immediately returns to her room so that no one has time to talk to her, but when she arrives Yuki is already standing at the door and wants to talk to her at Jiraiya's house. He takes off his clothes and is about to watch some movie, but then Chifuyu suddenly appears and says that he also wants to watch a movie. Jiraiya says that there is no movie and asks why she came and she replies that she quarreled with Ki because he told her to stop going to the literary club and playing with high school students. Hearing this, Jiraiya says that she is better return home and they will talk about it tomorrow, as she replies that it is awkward because she is still at home and does not want to meet him like this. Jiraiya asks if she wants him to come with her and she agrees, but sends him home. Through the portal before he can get dressed he teleports right in front of her room, and Yuki comes out apologizing to the Chifu for going too far, but to her horror she sees the head of the pervert Jiraiya sitting on the bed, begins to panic and runs back to the room. Soon Chifuyu catches up with her and goes up the stairs, and Yuki runs out of the house, hugs her and tells her to stop communicating with high school students, otherwise they will turn her into a pervert to play with them, and she likes to play with her, but Yuki doesn't believe it and leaves the house in anger. The next day, Chifu and Jiraiya are sitting on the bench after school and drinking soda. Chifuyu says that she failed to mend their friendship and that Yuki ignored her all day. She refused to tie the band and did not eat green pepper for lunch. And now she will have to go to Africa and buy a new Jiraiya for her and asks if she is serious. But she says that for the sake of likes she will say that it was a joke and no one can replace Yuki. She says that she may never be able to be friends with Yuki again, but then Dry sits down on one knee in front of her like a knight and says that he will bring her friend back and she has nothing to worry about. After that, Chifuyu returns to the literature club and Jira goes to Yuki's school to meet her there. She comes out and is immediately scared when she sees him and asks if he is stalking her, but he says that Chifuyu told him about her schedule and he just needs her to listen to him until the next one arrives bus. They go to the bus stop and talk on the road. Joe says that everyone has their own secrets that cannot be told to others, and this applies even to best friends. Yuki says that she understands this, but she doesn't like that Sifu is hiding something from her. Then Jira says that he will tell her his secret, but she must promise that she will not tell it to anyone and that Sifu values her very much as a friend. After that, he admits that he is a perverted lolicon and Sifu plays with him so that look after him and not let him become a threat to society. Hearing this, Yuki looks at him and wonders why he is so proud of this, but then Satomi-sensei comes with Sifu in the car and gives Yuki the same soft toy and asks her to become her friend again. Yuki hugs her and they finally make up. The next day, Jiraiya comes into the club room and the others tease him with his nickname Night Lolicon and Low-Grade Sinner, but he ignores them like a real loser and continues to praise Vi to make her feel good. Then he asks why she wants to quit school and she answers that unlike the not very smart people who watch this video, she studies on her own because she wants to go to high school as soon as possible to be on par with them and take his place as a vibe. A few days later, Jiraiya enters the club with a huge red guitar in a case. He sits on a chair and tries to attract attention to himself, but everyone moderately ignores him. However, Sunho can't stand it and asks what it is that Mayu says that they deliberately ignored him so that he wouldn't be arrogant. Anything could be there until you look at how Lord Schrödinger proved. Tomoe looks at him without much interest and then allows him to open the box inside, which is a red guitar. He calls it Maria Infinity, and then Shiu comes into the room and asks about the guitar. She asks if she can take the guitar, but Shiu says that she can and that he's not greedy. It's just Maria. It's his second half and he can't give it to anyone. After hearing this, she asks him to close his eyes for a second and duplicates the guitar and then asks him to choose the real one. She says that he can choose the right one by breaking the other one, and Juri tries to cheat and takes both and then breaks them on the floor. He says that the chief was very smart and both guitars must be fake, but she says that she was honest and he just smashed his sweet Maria-chan on the floor. Ja falls to his knees and starts crying over her fragments, and Sayu waits for him to finish his drama before restoring the guitar. After school, he goes out with Hotoko, but remembers that he forgot his backpack in the club and asks her to go without him. He returns, what he sees greatly surprises him in the room. Tamaya plays the same game as in middle school, and it turns out that it is she who is to blame for the fact that Dry became the way he became because he idealized her teenage years and she grew out of it, and he is the only one who knows about her dark past. He comes in and says that he is glad to meet a comrade who enjoys the sacred art, or GI, and then says that he came for his backpack. He bends down to pick it up and manages to see the screen of the laptop Tamu before she closes it with a red face. She asks if he saw anything and he asks if she means the most visited site in the world, but she says that it is not him, and he begins to read the attack-style story that he saw on the screen. She asks how he could read all this into seconds, and he smiles back at her because he underestimated the power of the Sharingan that was activated in him. After he saw the sad death of his social life, she begins to strangle him so that he does not give away her secret, and asks why he is so calm. If he wants to laugh, he can. But he says that there is nothing funny in becoming the author of a light novel, and she understands that she is talking to the Lord of the Attack himself and calms down. They talk about their dreams and hobbies, and that Major says that she failed the competition twice in a row, and although she has superpowers to manipulate time, she can't even write a decent novel, and her abilities won't help solve her family's problems. Jura asks if she would like to get these abilities instead of time manipulation. Then he gets up and starts reading some manga, releasing his power and creating a ball of black flames. He says that it looks cool and in the end, it's the only thing that matters, and they shouldn't be dishonored again. Feels happy, confident, and asks, he always pretends to be stupid when he can be so serious at such moments. He replies that he is always serious as required by His Majesty. Meanwhile, Hotoko was waiting for him all this time, and finally gave up and went home alone the next day. Tomoe sits on the phone all day, like many modern teenagers, and is excited about something during lunch. Jiro asks him, and he tells him that he passed the first round of one of the novel writing competitions for which Jiro applied. He says that this should be celebrated. She says that she didn't tell anyone from their group, but he suggests celebrating and asks what she wants to eat. She asks for a special one cake that they sell in this cafe during lunch, and they decide to go there on the weekend. The day comes and Tamayo starts to worrying about what to wear, but in the end she calms down because it's just Juri and she doesn't want to look too strict. On the other hand, she is worried that he will dress something too Japanese and she won't want to go with him in public the next morning. And to her surprise, Juri is dressed in normal clothes and he tells her that he is not allowed to choose his own clothes, and this makes him the older sister. They go to a cafe and Juri asks one of the most important questions in life: how many times do you need to go to a cafe so that you can order a regular dish? After that, he offers to take a couple of desserts at a discount and even orders himself a double espresso to look cool. Not after that, they go to the anime and manga store and end the day with sweet drinks. Jura says that he had fun and hopes that she liked it too, and they go home together. But to complicate the plot a little, he passes. Hodoka sees them together. Now let's leave Hodoka aside and move on to Jura's birthday. Everyone in the literature club kept it a secret from him and came up with a game where they themselves were the characters and Jura was the hero. He likes it, and they congratulate him on his birthday, making him cry. The next day, Sayumi doesn't come to school and everyone wonders if she got sick because she worked too hard on the game. To make up for her, they decide to send someone from their group to visit her, and it turns out that the winner is Dry because she worked a lot for him. On the same day, he comes to her home, and it turns out that she lives in a large mansion. If it was not obvious from her huge plots of land, now it is clear that she is rich. Dry rings the doorbell and is greeted by Sayu herself, who wears glasses and looks very cute. He comes in and she treats him to tea. They talk about her health. Dry notices that she looks good with glasses, and her casual clothes also look cute, which makes her blush. At that moment, Segu and Maya's younger sister comes in and congratulates her sister for finally having a boyfriend. Gumi scolds her and apologizes for her behavior, but then takes out her album with her high school graduation photos and together they start looking at old pictures. She tells him that her late grandmother always told her that she should be a real woman and that's why she always tries to be correct and perfect. While looking at the photos, Dry notices that she was the student council president and asks why she didn't become one in high school. But she suddenly drops ice and asks him to leave because he wants to sleep because of the medicine. Dry thinks that he probably said something wrong and quietly leaves. The next day Sayu does not come to the club after classes and Dry begins to worrying about her. He calls his little sister and asks her about Sayu, says that she was very upset yesterday when he left and says that she was upset when he mentioned the position of student council president. Sister says that in high school, she was the ideal president, but because of this she often quarreled with other council members, and this led to her stop being president, so she decided to create an ideal student council in senior. After hearing this, D0 wonders why she didn't become president then and asks about it. Maria says that she thought about it too, but maybe it's due to her abilities and friendship with the members of the literary club. Maybe she prefers the relationship with them to the position of the student council president. Then he asks when the elections for the school council are held and she answers that they had to apply before September and the elections were held around mid-October. Then he remembers that it was around the time when they received their spazo and Sayu offered to rub them using her ability to move because it's the best way for them to return to normal life as high school students. Hair stands up and objects to this idea, asking her to fight to decide what they will do. They fight each other behind the school using their abilities to the fullest. During their fight, Jiri begins to cast spells to activate his ability, but Sue doesn't let him finish, like all the Dragon Ball villains did who allowed their enemies to accumulate power for hours. She continues to beat him up and heal him with her ability every time, interrupting his reading, but it turns out that Jurek is a masochist who likes to be hit, especially if it's you, and he says that he doesn't know when to give up. Then he asks her to let him finish the spell and stands up, using his ability Dark to create a wish from Craigslist that he ordered on AliExpress. Sue just uses her fighting skills to defeat him, and then says that now that he has revealed his ability, he has nothing to regret and uses his power to return him to the initial state. She thinks that this will erase his abilities, but to her surprise, this does not happen, and she asks if he knew about this. He says that it is possible when he receives her power it will be difficult for her to perceive her as something alien, and the same can be said about her attitude towards others, so she cannot erase them. After all, they are part of her essence. She asks why he fought so many times and got hit in the ass, and he begins to think what would be so cool to say because he cannot admit that he just likes it. When she hits him, finally he decides to tell her that he would like to preserve their friendship because it will be better for both of them. She says that she can't trust anyone, even herself, and is afraid that one of them might go crazy and use their powers for evil. Jiraiya comes to her and says that it's not so scary and that he will show her how to play with these powers and have fun. This gives her hope because Dre probably knows more than anyone about how dangerous their powers are. Let's return to the real Jiraiya's home to Sai to apologize to her because he thinks that she is not joined the student council because of him, and their fight. Sayu catches up with him and they sit down to talk. He tells her everything and asks if she's mad at him. She says she wasn't mad, that it was a misunderstanding and that she was really sleepy because of the medicine she took the day before, and that's why she asked him to leave. She went straight to bed, and today she couldn't come to the club room because she needed to pick up new lenses. Then she shows him the receipt from the store and says that she can never be mad at him because she knows that he did it for her sake and gave her hope. She says that she did not join the student council because she did it in middle school for one person, and in high school, she was going to do it again out of selfish motives. In her opinion, this is wrong and she is against this. Chihiro repeats the words of her grandmother that a woman should be decent and then says that who cares if they are not like that. After all, no one is perfect and she is already beautiful as she is. After hearing this, Somi says that the grandmother's words were different. Become a decent woman and then you will definitely meet someone who will tell you that being different is normal. She says that she would never have thought that it would be him who would say such words to her and that she really understands their meaning. When the misunderstanding was cleared up, everything became as before, and later that day, you see that momentarily she was next to him, but unfortunately she normal your end. She also has feelings for him, but for the love of God, She can't understand what's so cool about pretending that your right hand hurts writing words one way and reading them another, like some psychopath seeing that Dry spends more and more time with Tamaya. She starts to get jealous and her patience is also running out because she can't understand him, although she knows him the longest. One day, in the morning, Sister Jer, I will be his, and tells him to call his current slave tonight because her parents won't be at home, and she doesn't want to die by eating some slime that they will prepare. Jera thinks the same man says that he will talk to her in class and is going to go to school. On the way to school, he goes with Hodo and asks her to cook dinner tonight. They decide to make meat and potatoes, without vegetables and potatoes. Hodo is very happy and goes to class with a smile. After school, they gather for a club event, the theme of which is light novels. Everyone chooses a theme and presents their work, but Tamaya says that she didn't come up with anything and apologizes for not writing anything. Sayu says that everything is fine. After finishing classes, Dry asks Hodo to go home because he needs to talk to Hotoka, is sad but still leaves and goes home alone. In the club, Jera plays with Tamaya, makes an imaginary combo movement. She asks why he is doing this and says that she is not upset enough to play imaginary worlds with him, and that she also has work. He says that he asked her to stay because he knows that she feels depressed due to the fact that she can't write something bad or not up to her standards, and therefore couldn't write an essay even though she's probably the best writer among them. She asks how he knows this and he replies that it's plot armor. He helps her become more confident and asks what's bothering her, and she shows him her new novel and says that she's having trouble coming up with names for the main characters. After that, Jiraiya goes home and Hokoda meets him with food on the stove. She asks he hasn't come for so long and notices that he's texting someone. She asks, isn't this mine, and what they were talking about, but he replies that she still won't understand and says that it's not that important. Now let's talk a little about the past. A long time ago, before Dry awake and the power of the conqueror in himself and collected girls in his club like some Pokemon trainer, he only had a current. She was always a little cowardly and poorly versed in the Vite and Taka culture, but the only person who was always next to her was Shiroi. They became good friends and were always together, but over time, it became obvious that they were not suitable for each other. He was an anime fan and she was the most ordinary. But despite this, she always smiled and tried to find happiness in his happiness. But now when Dre says that she still won't understand, it becomes very painful for her. And considering what is happening with Tamaya, she can't stand it and starts crying. She tells him that she doesn't understand his anime, stupid children's games, and wants him to explain everything to her so that she understands, and then runs out of the house. Zirai runs after her, but it's too late, and in the end, he runs into Saogami, who asks him if he was looking for a Hodo because she recently ran past him in slippers and an apron. They talk about what happened and Saogami says that it was inevitable and that it was obvious to anyone who watched them from the side. After that, Drac begins to look for her but cannot find her and also falls. He calls Tamaya and Sayu for help and asks them to also look for his first slave and the cook who ran away 2 aprons and left the food on the stove. They look for it for several hours but can't find it. Then Sayu says that maybe it's time to use it, the second evolution of her power, and they think about it. Meanwhile, Koto finally calms down and begins to scold herself for what she did and for not understanding her childhood friend. She is very sad, and then she meets her older brother _Ma from Ishikadi Tamaya. He asks her to sit down and talks about such anime-obsessed people as Dry and how they understood the paradoxical things and at the same time want to preserve the mystery of their character. So a friend who does not fully understand them but still plays along with them fantasies necessary for existence, and he assures her that Dre will never think less of her and that she should appreciate him more. After hearing this, Otoka felt happy again, but then we see that a group of people is approaching them, and Hajime eats her with the help of his special ability. Let's go back a little to the time when Hajime met Jiraiya. Turns out, in this world there are fairies. These are magical creatures who love to watch people fight each other, make baits on the winners, and have fun. It's called the Fairy War, and now the 3rd Fairy War is going on. To make it more interesting, the fairies give people powers and abilities so that they can put on a bright show, so Dre and the rest receive their abilities according to the rules of the Fairy War. The losers return to their normal state, and all memories of abilities and battles are erased. Among thousands of participants, the last day will be rewarded with the right to make a wish, and that's why they all participate in the fairy war. It's like fate, but without deaths, and they also fixed the Holy Grail of Hajime Challenge. One of the participants sent by a group called F to defeat his Hajimba and creates a circle around him. He says that during the fight, he did not even use his abilities and did not take a single step outside the circle to show how different are in strength and skills. His opponent Taho was very strong, but Hajime said that Hajime cannot be trusted in the promises of the enemy. Then he used his special ability, the Point Abyss, to create a small black hole and suck him inside. Without leaving anything after that, he left the circle and got into the car with his partner, and then Ha woke up without memories and towers. In the car, Hayu tells Hitomi and their friend Fairy Paradise about the fairy war at the Reher base, reports that they finally found the F base and now is the time to attack them. Then she complains that the authorities do not want to destroy F because their main goal is to end the fairy war, and Hajin tells her to stop using sneaky tricks because he knows that the only reason they revealed to him the location of the base is for him to destroy them, and it would be very convenient for them. He suspects that there are some internal disagreements between the fairies and then says that he is not against it. But according to human customs, they should at least ask normally and say please. After that he goes outside and goes to his old school to rest a little. There he meets Jiraiya, and then we all know what happened next. Meanwhile, we see how the reader talks to Naomi about how she wants to save Underscore from danger, and in the end, she says that she will go and destroy the AF along with the rest of the team without telling Hajime about this. We are also introduced to the other members of the group, including Yuzawa, who has the ability to spread his multiple personality disorder to other people, like Naji, who has the ability to create dimensions between dimensions, Shubhout, who has the ability to destroy the cores of anything he cuts with his knife, Aki, who has the ability to learn everything about others' powers just by looking at them, and Hitomi, who has the ability to immerse others in Jinjutsu and cause them a state of confusion like in the Pokemon games, allowing them to look at her left eye. She can also transfer this ability to others. Altogether they plan to infiltrate the base at night and attack it, but when they go inside they find that everything is destroyed and meet a girl who is sitting on the rubble. Her name is Siston, and she is known as the secret weapon of the form. Maki uses her powers to look at her abilities and immediately loses her mind when she realizes that she has the power of God, which allows her to create and use any abilities she wants. She rushes at Itomi, but before her fist sends her into another world, Hajime appears on the stage and blocks the blow with his gravitational force. She asks him why he stopped her because he was the one who told her to destroy F. He replies that they are not from F and are actually part of his group. Everyone looks at them in confusion, and it turns out that Hajime D, after that he told her to destroy F and then told everyone that he was leaving and left. Hitomi tries to stop him but realizes that he is wounded and he is bleeding, so she lets him go and he asks her not to tell anyone about this. A few weeks later we see that Ling and he was forbidden to wear that until he recovers. He begins to think about how to quickly cure the eye and immediately remembers Jiraiya's gang, which he called Girly. Great name. True. He decides to kidnap one of them, which has the ability to heal others, but accidentally kidnaps the current. His friends scold him for this mistake and put her to bed, hoping that her friends will come and save her on the other side. Sue tells everyone to return to the literature club and they call Chifu. She begins to call them by name and says that Hotoka is not in the literary club. This is not their normal state. To return everything to normal, she uses her ability of the second stage of the Circle of Oboro and returns their state to normal, causing Hotoka on the chair. She wakes up and greets everyone, but they tell her that it's almost night, and Jira apologizes to her for making her sad and worry. Tamaya also gets up and says that she wanted to become the author of a light novel, but Dry found out about it earlier and she didn't want this to become a problem for someone. Hotoka also understands everything and Jiraiya will remain his friend. She takes his hand and says that it is warm like in childhood when he came and saved her, and she was afraid of something and hid under the stairs, and everything returns to its place. Chifu takes out a bag of chips and asks Jiraiya to open it. He stands on the table and begins to open it like a clown, but then his hand begins to burn with black flames and it turns out that he too unlocked the second stage of his ability. He raises his hand and releases a stream of hot black flames into the ceiling but then screams in pain because his hand is also on fire. Now let's wait and find out what his awakened ability is and skip a few weeks. Tamaya finally finished writing her novel that she was working on and gave it to Jiraiya so that he could give her some advice. He says that he is always ready to help, and she replies that in such moments, she is glad that he is really like that. He teases her, asking if this is how she should approach the person from whom she is asking for help, and she begins to apologize. He wonders why she decided that he was serious, and she says that she actually respects him and thinks that it is really amazing that he does not give up his delusional ideas, despite all the difficulties that he faced because of them. Jiraiya replies that he does not consider himself so persistent, and in fact, when he was in the 8th grade of high school, he thought that he would soon end with these delusional ideas. But then he met a girl who was the same if not more crazier than him. She wore a white wig and called herself an evil name. Man, Tamaya has memories of those dark times, and she asks him to shut up and runs away. It turns out that he didn't know that this girl was actually Tamaya. Meanwhile in the room, Hitomi, Yusen, and Nagi are looking at the recording from the surveillance cameras to make sure that no one escaped from their mission to destroy the base. But it turns out that one woman was able to get out through the back door, and in order to fix everything they decide to simply delete the post and hope that Underscore doesn't find out about it a few days later. Jiraiya and the others are preparing for their exams. Jiraiya knows everyone with his fake antics when he tries to study, and Tamaya tries to shut him up with a book, but that only makes him sound even more like the masochist he is. Sayu tells him not to get distracted while studying, and he replies that it looks like he will have to use his awakened power again. The others immediately get angry at him and tell him not to even think about it and force him promise that he will seal his power forever. Later during club activities, he asked several people about their grades in school. She says that they are quite normal, and he asks her about the results of the last math test. She says that got a 0, and that worries him a lot. Then she adds that before that she had 100 and that her brain works differently depending on how she feels on a given day. After that she asks him about his grades, and he says that he also has quite normal grades, maybe a little above average. She asks him which of them is smarter, he or Hotoka, and he asks her about the results of the last semester exam. Hotoka says that she took 32nd place and Juri is 38th. After hearing this, Tamaya is very surprised and upset knowing that he scored more points than her. She says that she took 88th place, which is in the middle of the list of 198 students in their class. Finally, Shifui asks Yumi about her grades, and she says that she was second and Mari was first, but they both switch places in every exam. After everything became known, it became obvious that I was the stupidest thing in the class, and she began to study like a rabbit so as not to be considered even stupider than Dry. To help her, Hotoka suggested workout with her. Later in the evening they met in a cafe and worked out over a cup of coffee. Hotoka asked her about the words that Dry uses. She explained them easily like a real fan, and Hotoka was surprised at how easily she understands Dry. Soon the exams were over and Dry still scored more points than Mai. Having cleaned the room, he went to take out the trash, and Shifu also helped him. Going downstairs, she asked him what he prefers, carry with food or with a drink, giving an example that I will not give here. She made him realize that although she loves summer holidays, she will be sad because she will not be able to be with them. Then she asked him to invite her to the pool, and they are free during the holidays, and was happy again. A few days later, the FBI reported that Shifu felt heaviness and warmth in her heart, and she told about it to Kyuki. She asked if she felt the same, man. Kyuki said that this happens when she talks to Jiraiya. Kyuki realized that she must protect her friend from this vile pervert at all costs. For now they were preparing. Saja remained on the sidelines as the most unloved heroine in grief. She goes to the bathroom and thinks that it would be nice to put on glasses because Dry said that she looks good in them. Then comes in with Saga and says that he knows that she is in love with Jiraiya and wants her to hook up with him so that later he can write a good article about it. He wants everyone who watches this video to underscore themselves with anger, and so that everyone underscore who dreams of her stepping on them will be happy. He throws her glasses in trash and says that according to the laws of anime, a girl is always a secondary character, so if she wants to become the main character for her hairy Jiraiya, she should take his hand and let him make her the main character. Meanwhile, Hoko and Tamaya sit together and Hoko asks if she loves anyone. First she asks if she loves anyone and she answers that she doesn't, just like a real sunny fawn. Then Hokoto admits that she is in love with Jiraiya and wants to tell her about it because knows him better than anyone and she knows him worst of all. She again asks if she loves someone so that she too accepts her feelings or so that she takes Jiraiya for herself once and for all. Meanwhile, Dry is enjoying the summer holidays. It's time for fan service. Summer vacation has begun, and the first to us are Chifu and Yuki. They invite Jiraiya to the pool as they promise before the start of the holidays. Today, Kiki has only one goal: to ruin Jiraiya's reputation in front of Chifu so that she understands how vile he really is. At first, she thinks she doesn't like greedy men and decides to make him buy them a lot of food until he runs out of money. To her surprise, he buys them so much food that their bellies swell like watermelons and his wallet doesn't even sweat. Then she decides that no one likes a loser and decides to play a jig on her child, making him a loser. She sees Mr. Muscle sunbathing by the pool and decides to approach him, but then she realizes that she is very shy and is afraid of people and starts cry. When the big guy gets up and asks if he can take her to the center for lost children. Luckily for her, Jerry finds her and saves her, which makes him even better. Finally, she decides to make him look like a fool by making him participate in the children's animal knowledge competition. They all line up for cubes, and the main prize for correct answers turns out to be a large SUV. The second prize is a stuffed whale, and Shiu seems to like it more. They start answering questions, and Shiu manages to answer all 7 in a row. There are only 3 teams left, and the presenter begins to ask more complex questions, for example about physics. For the 8th question, everyone understands that they had no chance of winning the prize, but to everyone's surprise, the giraffe takes out a pen and answers correctly. Because he knows a bunch of random facts thanks to his love for anime, he easily answers the last 3 questions and wins the main prize, and then goes up to the plush toy and says that he will take it instead of the prize and gives it to Chifu on the way home. Yuki begins to doubt whether Chifu is really a good guy and thinks that maybe she was worrying in vain. Chifu is fast asleep, and Dry asks her to remain his friend because he and everyone else in the literature club consider her a comrade and will not be able to spend so much time with her when he finishes school. Kyuki says that he doesn't need to ask her for this because she will remain his best friend no matter what. A few days later, Dry buys a manga and he gets a call from Yumi. She calls him at the water park and says that her sister refused at the last moment and she will be embarrassed to go there alone with a ticket for to. Dry says that everything is fine and goes with her. After that, they part at the locker room, and when Dry goes inside, Sagami comes out and we see that it was his plan. He tells her to go and put on the swimsuit that he prepared for her. She doesn't like that he plays with her like a doll after changing clothes. She comes out and he tells her that she needs to be careful because the swimsuit becomes transparent when it gets wet, and she runs away from him with a water pistol. Then Yumi meets with Rhea and he praises her for sacrificing herself for the fans and then asks her to help him learn to swim, but she only thinks about how not to get wet and activates her ultra instinct to be in better shape. They warm up, play in the pool and pass different obstacle courses, but she copes without getting her clothes wet at all and everyone applauds her. But then 2 children pass by and pour water on her, which makes her very embarrassed. She looks down and realizes that Sagami eyed that the swimsuit is transparent and then slaps him in the face. After that, she says that she will no longer be his puppet and that now she will play honestly and leaves. Jimmy says that in the end, he did not manage to achieve his goal and decides to call for help from a squad of superheroes, but his partner turns out to be that same woman who escaped from the destruction of the group. Now Yumi returns and meets with Jirai and they spend the rest of the day as friends playing in the pool. Later that night, Tamaya calls her and asks if he is free tomorrow. She has 2 tickets to the same water park in her hands and it is clear what he wants, but Sir says that he will go for 1 day with his family and it will be a joint trip with the Hitoka family. But after that he is free and asks what she wanted to tell him, but she replies that it doesn't matter and hangs out. After that she goes to bed and has a dream about her first meeting with Jiraiya, and they were in middle school. He didn't recognize her because she was wearing a white wig and purple contact lenses. He seemed much older than now and she was the bonker's best. One day, in the winter, she broke the chain on her bike and Dry came to her and helped her fix it and told her to stop acting like an anime-obsessed girl. but she told him that made-up stories exist in fact, and put her fist on his heart saying that they live inside us, feeling like an anime heroine. She left and that was their first meeting. The next morning, we return to the Hoko and she is about to confess her feelings to Jiraiya. She chooses a magazine and follows the best guide to confessing love 60 days edition. She buys a cute swimsuit to wear to the beach and tries to get Jiraiya to look at her more often. She changes her behavior, becomes more cheerful, selfish, and a little clumsy because according management likes it. The guys meanwhile drive surprised what happens to her, and his sister makes him work, let him be a slave as befits a man. After that's why she invites him to play beach volleyball and deliberately hits him in the face with a sword. While you all wonder what kind of contradiction this is, let's move on to her next plan, which is to make him put sunscreen on her. She lies down on the sand and calls for his help, but the sunscreen is gone, so she decides to move on to plan B. She gets up and asks him to catch up with her, but he refuses because it's kind of gay and he doesn't want to yet confess. She, with tears in her eyes, asks him to catch up with her, but he refuses, and in the end they run after each other for a long time. Finally, she hides behind the stones, hugs him, and confesses her feelings of falls because she is dizzy from running in the sun. Later in the evening, she sits next to him and apologizes for her strange behavior all day. She tells him that she did something very bad under mine, and now she is very sad. Drac tells her that people are sometimes evil, but it's normal if we realize our mistakes and we are trying to fix them. She tells him that they have been friends for a very long time and asks that if they go to different colleges and maybe move to different cities, it will stop being friends with Jiraiya, and asks if she remembers how he stood in the rain outside her house. He tells her that in life he often had hard times, but her presence always helped him get up and move on. He tells her that no matter how far they are from each other and no matter how long they have not seen each other, she will always be special to him, and they will never stop being close friends. You heard in the water park alone. She doubts that it will be that bad, but then she realizes that it's really sad and she's just having a bad day. She didn't make it to the second round of the competition and is very upset. She's going to tell Jiraiya about this, but doubts that he will correctly understand her feelings for him and her communication with the Hadako. On night, Jura calls her and asks her to meet him at the summer festival. She puts on a yukata and all that, and he decides to treat her. She says that last time he treated her to her, so this time they will compete, and the loser will have to treat the winner. Dry accepts the challenge and prepares to win, but ends up being defeated when she knocks down all his prizes and wins both 4-0. After they enjoy the festival and all the attractions, he takes her to a secluded place and asks her to start talking. She asks what all this means, and he says that he knows that she is upset, and Hadaka told him that she did something bad also. She called him before he left and was upset. When she heard this, she realized that the lamb felt guilty and said that he had nothing to worry about. It was women's business. Besides, she told him that she did not pass the competition and apologized for disappointing him. He said that she had nothing to be ashamed of and that he was glad that she had the courage to tell him about it. She asked if he wanted to console her, but he said that he would not because she tried very hard and he respects that and she has the right to be upset about it, and he is always there to listen. After hearing it was her laid her head on his chest and called him an idiot. At that moment the fireworks started and they realized that they were standing in a wonderful place where they could be seen. Looking at the fireworks, she remembered all the moments that she spent with him and admitted to herself her feelings for him, saying that she loved that moment while everyone was in a good mood. Maria unexpectedly came. The guest was none other than a former member of the group, and it turned out that she can inhabit other people's bodies, like another from Naruto. She used her abilities and inhabited the body of Muret, and then called the members of the literary club to school for some urgent matter. Although they had summer holidays the next day, they gathered in the room and waited for her, not knowing what would happen next. Suddenly Maria bursts into the room holding her hand and says that she is on fire. Hawkeye uses her powers to create a water sphere, but to everyone's surprise, Mari uses her powers and takes away the element. Hawkeye her ability to block it with a wall of earth. Mari says that this is exactly what she wanted and uses her ability to take away the powers of food, becoming almost omnipotent at this moment. Tamaya uses her powers to stop time after reading Jura's instructions on paper and takes everyone out of the school. They decide to hide in the karaoke room. Hotoka says that Maria is really serious about killing her, but at the same time something about her seems strange. Jura says that her body and abilities are the same but her personality is different, and there is a possibility that someone is manipulating her or she is possessed by someone who also has superpowers. Then he says that they will have to ask her about it themselves and calls her on Moreau's phone. She picks up the phone and he tries to speak naturally, but Jiraiya realizes that she is not the real Mar and asks if she wants to meet in person. She agrees and invites him to the literary club. After the call ends, we find out that Sagami is behind all this and he processes Moreau's body to steal their powers, and in exchange for an interesting story that he can watch, he will allow her to join them in the Fallen Black. Even though she is a member of the XF group, she asks him what kind of people with superpowers they know nothing about War of the Fairies, and he says that this makes them even more interesting. In the karaoke room, everyone asks Jiraiya about his plan. He says that there is only one way to defeat Mari and force the one who controls her to leave her body, but for this he needs to use his evolution and ask them for permission, and my opinion is against this, but one of them wants to repeat what happened before, but Jiraiya says that this is their only chance, and they agree, and everything is settled. He goes to the literary club alone and tells the others to hide in the school and not to go out like Mari did not torture. Then he enters a room that is connected to another space created by the world. Mari is waiting for him inside and asks where his friends are, but Jiraiya tries to turn the conversation in his favor using the most powerful jutsu in the history of anime, conversational jutsu, but to everyone's surprise, Mari does not want to listen to his nonsense and uses the world to create two huge boxing gloves and hit him. Then she says that this is war and will torture him until his friends come and starts attacking him with water balls. Jiraiya says that the fact that she has not killed him yet means that it is not profitable for her and she needs his friends to take their towers. Then he tells her that they will not come because he already told them to hide even if she kills him. Maria replies that she will take care of it and shoots him with a bow. After a small scuffle, he pulls out an arrow like some tough guy and throws it, and then says that it is time to show her his new ability. With these words, he begins to mutter something in an incomprehensible language and calls darkness that turns into a fireball around his hand. This time the flame is really hot and he tries to hit her with it. She wonders what it was and how his ability has changed, but decides to think about it later and takes it for himself. To her surprise, even after she took the ability, the flame disappears from his hand and she thinks that she failed to check. She also sets her hand on fire. She doesn't understand what is happening, but her hand starts to burn dry, laughs and says that his new ability turns his flames into flames from the hell furnace, which he stole from Sasuke and Itachi, but it is still useless because it burns him and there is no way to put it out. He remembers the first time he awakened his new ability when he opened a packet of chips for the chief and they tried to extinguish the flame with ice and carbon dioxide with the help of the chief, and how but nothing worked in the end. Sayu forced the chief to create a small gelt well to cut off his burning hand and then used her powers to return it to its original form. After that they made him promise that he would never use his ability again. After learning that his ability was useless, Mir became worried and tried his best not to get burned, but Jiraiya that the only way to do this is to give others their powers back.